I moved into the forest house in early September, just after my second year of college ended. It wasn't exactly what I expected when I agreed to sublet it for the semester. Photos online made it look cozy, almost quaint. In reality, it was bigger, older, and lonelier than I anticipated. 2 stories, empty, except for a few old furnishings, surrounded on all sides by thick, silent woods. The first few nights were quiet in a way that felt almost too quiet. The wind barely rustled the leaves. The only sounds were the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant rumble of logging trucks in the national park nearby. I liked it at first. It was peaceful, and I needed that after 2 years of dorm chaos. Then I started noticing the small things. A shadow in the corner of a window, just a flicker as I walked past. Footsteps outside when I was sure I had locked every door. Little things I could rationalize. Maybe a deer, maybe the wind. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. By the end of the first week, I had settled into a routine. Classes online, meals in the tiny kitchen, long walks through the woods when the cabin fever itch hit. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just the forest making me nervous. The place was remote. Who would even come out here? It was the 3rd night when I first saw him. I was in the living room, sprawled across the old couch, trying to finish an assignment for one of my psych classes. The full moon was bright through the sliding glass doors that faced the backyard. I had the music low, headphones in, and my laptop perched on my knees. Then I noticed it, a figure just standing at the edge of the tree line. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows, a tree limb, the moonlight bouncing off something white. Then he moved, slow, deliberate, just a step forward. He didn't run, he didn't hide, he just watched. My heart hammered in my chest, and I froze. He was a man, maybe late 20s, thin, unkempt hair, pale face illuminated faintly by the moonlight. His eyes, they weren't wild exactly, just empty, staring straight at me, unblinking. I tried to convince myself it was someone wandering the woods, lost, maybe a hiker. I even opened the door slightly to speak, my voice trembling. Can I help you?" He didn't answer. He didn't move. Then, after what felt like hours but was probably seconds, he turned and melted back into the trees. I locked every door, drew the blinds, and didn't sleep a wink that night. The next day, I told myself I had to be rational. I checked all the locks, made a quick walk around the house. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. Whoever it was, they had vanished completely. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the isolation had gotten to me. But that night, the tapping started. Not the soft, random tapping of a branch hitting a window in the wind. This was deliberate, slow. 3 taps, pause, 2 more. Then silence. I crept toward the window, keeping myself in shadow. Nothing. Just the moonlight glinting off the sliding glass doors. I tried to sleep, shotgun under my bed, cat huddled in my lap, but the sense of being watched didn't leave. I couldn't shake it. I felt eyes on me from every corner, every dark patch of the woods. By week 2, I started noticing patterns. The taps were always around 2:30 a.m., always the same rhythm. Sometimes they would come at the back window, sometimes the front, and always, after they stopped, I would find footprints in the soft dirt of the yard, bare footprints. They never led directly to the house. They circled, as if he was surveying every window, every door, every angle. I started keeping a journal, not for class, but for sanity. Every night I wrote the time, the location of the tapping, the size of the footprints, anything unusual. I called the police once just to report it. They came out, looked around, noted that the footprints matched bare human feet, and left. That was it. No arrests, no patrols, just a shrug. And still, he kept coming. The night was unusually still. Even the wind through the trees seemed hesitant, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I couldn't sleep, though I kept telling myself it was nothing, just my imagination. But every so often, a faint creak from the floorboards below reminded me that I wasn't alone. I lay in my bed, eyes fixed on the darkened window that framed the forest behind the house. Shadows shifted strangely between the trees, and the occasional snap of a twig made my stomach tighten. It wasn't the sound itself, it was the knowing that someone was out there, watching, waiting. I thought about calling my roommate, but the thought of explaining what I was hearing made my hands shake. The forest outside felt like it was pressing closer, every tree a silent sentinel hiding 1,000 unseen eyes. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate tap, like fingernails tracing the glass of the sliding door to the backyard. My heart jumped, and my breath caught in my throat. The sound wasn't random. It had rhythm, intent. I held completely still, listening. After a moment, a low, almost imperceptible shuffle of feet reached my ears. Someone moving in the undergrowth, careful, deliberate, yet deliberately audible. It wasn't running, not yet, just a presence pacing, observing. I wanted to move, to check the doors, to make sure the locks were secure, but every instinct screamed, "Don't be seen." I pulled the covers over my head, trying to breathe quietly, trying to make myself invisible, a small part of the room that wasn't noticed. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. The tapping stopped. For a brief, terrifying moment, I thought the intruder had gone. Then came the whisper, almost too faint to hear, but unmistakable. It wasn't words, not really, just a breath, a movement that brushed against the glass like it was testing me, daring me to notice. I stayed frozen until the first hint of grey seeped through the forest canopy, until the edges of the night softened into morning. When I finally dared to look out, there was nothing. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all, just the heavy silence of the forest. And yet, I knew that tonight, like every night before, I hadn't been alone. The fear lingered, not in what I could see, but in what the darkness had left behind, the feeling that someone was still out there just beyond sight, waiting. Night fell again, heavier than before. The forest seemed to close in, swallowing the fading light, and the air felt thick, almost solid, around the house. Every shadow in my room seemed sharper, deeper, reaching across the walls toward me. I couldn't shake the memory of the tapping on the glass. Every small noise, a branch scraping against the siding, a leaf rustling in the dark, made my stomach knot. My mind kept imagining shapes, faces, movements that weren't really there. And yet, the feeling of being watched refused to leave. Around midnight, a soft scratching sound began. At first, I thought it was the wind brushing something against the house. But then it came again, deliberate, slow, almost musical in its rhythm. Tap, 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 like someone tracing a pattern only they understood. I froze. My bed felt like a trap. My pulse thumped so loudly, I was sure the intruder could hear it. The scratching moved along the outside wall, pausing at each window, as if inspecting, testing, waiting. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. But the dread settled in my chest like ice. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but I couldn't risk it. Making a sound could be the worst thing I could do. Then came the faintest whisper, carried through the glass and the trees. It wasn't words. It was breath, human, close, yet impossible to pinpoint. My skin prickled, and my hair stood on end. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run, but my body refused. Hours passed. I felt the darkness press harder against the walls, the forest shifting outside, the sense that something moved closer with every heartbeat. I dared to peek through the blinds once, just a sliver, and saw nothing. The yard was empty, silent, clean, and yet the feeling that someone had been there, just there, lingered. By morning, I was trembling, exhausted. The house felt tainted, as if the walls themselves remembered the presence. I knew, deep down, that the watcher hadn't left. It wasn't the tapping or the scratching or the whispering that terrified me the most. It was the certainty that somewhere, out there in the forest, someone was waiting, and they knew exactly where I was. By the fourth night, I started to question my own memory. I'd wake up certain that I'd locked the door, only to find it ajar in the morning. Lights I knew I'd switched off were glowing softly in empty rooms. The kitchen window, which stuck so badly I had to shoulder it shut every time, would be open by an inch. I tried to convince myself it was stress. Online classes, isolation, too much caffeine. I even left a notebook on the table, writing down exactly what I locked and when, just to prove to myself I wasn't forgetting. But the next day, half the entries had been crossed out, in my own handwriting. I told myself maybe I'd done it in my sleep, that I'd gotten up, checked the doors again, and just forgotten. But the way the pen had cut through the words was too precise, too deliberate. The forest outside was silent that morning. Not peaceful, expectant. Even the birds were gone. The trees stood still, like they were listening. That night, I set my phone to record. I left it charging on the counter, camera facing the back door, light dimmed. I wanted proof of something, anything, even if it was just wind and shadows. When I checked the footage in the morning, it was an hour shorter than it should have been. The file had been trimmed. The first 30 minutes were normal. The kitchen, dark, faint hum of the fridge, nothing moving. Then, a blur, like someone brushing past the lens. The picture jolted, and for half a second, I could swear I saw a pale outline in the glass of the door. Not a face, not fully, just the shape of one, where no one should have been. I stopped watching halfway through. My stomach turned cold, and I shut the laptop. The sound that played right before the footage cut was small, almost delicate. The same 3 taps I'd been hearing for weeks. Tap, tap, tap. When I looked up, the blinds were half open. I hadn't touched them. The air felt wrong, heavier, thicker. The forest outside wasn't empty anymore. It was watching back. That night I didn't sleep at all. I stayed on the couch in the living room, blanket wrapped tightly around my shoulders, listening. Every creak of the floorboards upstairs made my heart pound. The wind in the trees sounded sharper somehow, scraping against the house like fingernails. I told myself I wasn't imagining it, that every sound was real, but that only made the fear worse. Around 2:17 a.m., I heard it again. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate, coming from the back door. My dog, usually asleep at my feet, stiffened and growled low in his throat, ears pinned. He didn't growl often, never this quietly. I wanted to see, to finally confront whatever it was, but every instinct screamed to hide. I barely breathed as I crept to the window, pulling the blinds just enough to peek. Nothing. The porch was empty, no movement. But the snow, if it had been snow or leaves, there were no prints leading away, no evidence of departure. I sank back onto the couch, shaking. Every part of me was alert, yet frozen. Every tap I imagined afterward made me flinch. Every shadow in the corner of the room seemed to twist toward me. Hours passed, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. Then, just before dawn, I heard it again. Faint, deliberate footsteps from the deck outside. Slow, heavy, pausing at each window, lingering just long enough that my pulse felt like it would burst from my chest. I pressed my face against the cold glass. There, in the dim grey light before sunrise, a figure stood, pale, still, unblinking, watching, not moving, not even breathing, it seemed. I wanted to speak, to call out, to ask why, but my voice refused me. My lips trembled, my throat tight. And then, the figure raised a hand, not a wave, not a greeting, just a slow, deliberate gesture, pointing at the house, at me. And then it stepped back, fading into the trees so seamlessly it was as if the forest had swallowed it whole. I never saw it leave. I never saw tracks, footsteps, or any sign that it had gone. Only the lingering sense of being watched, deeper than fear, colder than the night, and more invasive than any human could be. I haven't slept through a full night since. Every wind in the forest, every creak of the floor, every shadow at the edge of my vision, I see it again, waiting, watching, knowing, and I know, somehow, it's still out there. Morning finally broke, pale and grey over the forest. I stayed on the couch until the sun was high, watching the woods, expecting to see that figure again. But there was nothing, just the quiet rustle of leaves and the faint hum of life in the trees. I told myself it was over. Maybe a transient wanderer. Maybe my imagination magnifying every sound in the dead of night. I packed my things, double-checked the locks, and left the house. Every step toward the road felt like a small victory, though the tension in my shoulders didn't ease. I never went back to that forest house. The light stayed off, the windows shuttered, and I left the key with my parents. It was too quiet there, too empty. And I couldn't shake the memory of those deliberate taps, the unblinking stare, or the slow, echoing footsteps. Even now, months later, when I walk past a dark window or hear a faint, deliberate sound outside, a part of me tenses. My rational mind tells me it was over. It had to be. But my instincts whisper otherwise. I left the forest behind, but the memory didn't leave me. And sometimes, when the wind presses just right against the windows, I swear I hear it again. Tap, tap, tap. I locked the cabin door behind me, heart still hammering, but the forest didn't feel empty. The wind whispered through the trees in a way that almost sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the house. I swore I caught a glimpse of pale skin in the shadows, a face watching me for just a second before vanishing into the black. Even with every window bolted and every light off, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lingering, waiting. And somehow, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see that smile. A week later, back in the city, I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting those same wide eyes to be staring at me from the crowd. Every shadow in my apartment felt too long, every creak in the floor too deliberate. And then, one night, as I walked past the park on my way home, I froze. There, across the empty field, a figure stood perfectly still, framed by the flickering streetlight. The smile, the eyes. I didn't run. Not yet. I only watched, knowing somehow that this game had just begun. Had just begun.